The Veltari ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, like a silver needle falling from the sky. High Commander Zorath stood at the viewing window and watched the blue planet grow larger. He had traveled across 1,000 star systems in his long life, but he had never felt so desperate as he did now. His empire was dying. The Krath swarm had already consumed 47 Velthari worlds. Billions of his people were dead or enslaved. The greatest military force his species had ever assembled had been crushed in less than a year. Now, with no other options remaining, Zorath had come to beg for help from the most unlikely species in the galaxy, humans. The thought made his forearms tighten with frustration. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 40 years. They were considered young, emotional, and dangerously unpredictable. Most species avoided them. The common wisdom said that humans were too primitive to understand the complex politics of interstellar civilization. But the common wisdom had not faced the Krath swarm. The ship landed at a military base in a place the humans called Colorado. Zorath walked down the ramp with his diplomatic team behind him. The air was thin and cold, and the sun seemed weak compared to his homeworld. Human soldiers stood in neat rows, their faces hard to read. A woman in a dark uniform stepped forward. She was small by Velthari standards, barely reaching Zorath's chest. But she carried herself with quiet confidence. "High Commander Zorath," she said. "I am General Patricia Webb. The Terran Federation welcomes you to Earth." Zorath inclined his head in the formal greeting of his people. "General Webb, I thank you for receiving us. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "So do we," Webb replied. "We have been following reports of the Krath advance. Please, come inside. There is much to discuss." The meeting room was simple by Velthari standards. Plain walls, a long table, and screens showing star maps. Zorath found it almost offensive how basic it was. Did these humans not understand the gravity of the situation? He presented his case with as much dignity as he could manage. He showed them the footage of Krath attacks. He displayed the death counts. He explained how the swarm moved from world to world, consuming everything in its path. The Krath did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply destroyed. "We have fought them alone for 3 years," Zorath said. "We cannot win. Our fleet is broken. Our armies are exhausted. If we do not receive aid, the Velthari Dominion will cease to exist within 6 months." General Webb studied the data in silence. The other humans in the room exchanged glances that Zorath could not interpret. "What exactly are you asking for?" Webb finally said. "Ships, soldiers, anything you can spare." Zorath hated how weak he sounded. His ancestors would have been ashamed. "The Krath will not stop with us. Once the Dominion falls, they will look for new targets. Earth could be next." "We understand the threat," Webb said. "The Federation has already been discussing this possibility. We will help you." Zorath felt a wave of relief wash over him. But it was mixed with doubt. Human ships were crude compared to Velthari technology. Human soldiers had never faced a real galactic war. What could they possibly offer? 3 weeks later, Zorath stood on the bridge of the Velthari command ship and watched the human fleet arrive. There were only 12 vessels, 12 against the endless numbers of the Krath swarm. It seemed like a joke. The lead ship was called the Resolute. It was blocky and ugly, covered in weapons that looked more like they belonged on a ground vehicle than a starship. Zorath could not understand how humans flew in such things. "They are hailing us," said Admiral Cyrith, who stood beside Zorath. Cyrith was one of the finest military minds in the Dominion. He had survived 3 major battles against the Krath and lived to tell about it. Even he looked doubtful as he stared at the human ships. "Put them through," Zorath ordered. A human face appeared on the screen. He was a man with short, dark hair and calm, gray eyes. There were lines on his face that suggested he had seen difficult things. "High Commander Zorath, Admiral Cyrith," the man said. "I am Captain Daniel Grant of the Terran battleship Resolute. My fleet is at your disposal." "Captain Grant," Zorath replied. "We appreciate your presence. I must be honest with you. The enemy we face is unlike anything your species has encountered. Are you prepared for this? Grant smiled. It was a strange expression that Zorath did not fully understand. With respect, High Commander. We have been preparing for war since we learned to walk upright. We know what we signed up for. The combined fleet set course for the Velthari border world of Kethos Prime. It was a journey of several days. And during that time, Cyrith observed the humans closely. He did not like what he saw. They were loud. They gathered in groups and laughed at things that were not funny. They played games with cards and dice. They argued about trivial matters, and then embraced each other moments later. Their emotions seemed to change every few minutes. They are undisciplined, Cyrith reported to Zorath. I watched their combat drills. They talk constantly. They joke during training exercises. I do not see how they can function as soldiers. Zorath shared his concerns. Perhaps this was a mistake. Perhaps we should have sought help from the Vorathi collective instead. The Vorathi refused us, Cyrith reminded him. Everyone refused us. Only the humans said yes. That was the truth that Zorath could not escape. When the Dominion had sent pleas for help across the galaxy, every species had found a reason to say no. Too far away. Too dangerous. Not their problem. Only the humans had agreed without hesitation. Why? What did they hope to gain? On the fourth day of the journey, Cyrith visited the Resolute. He told himself it was a diplomatic courtesy. But really, he wanted to understand these strange creatures better. Captain Grant met him personally and gave him a tour of the ship. The vessel was cramped and uncomfortable. The corridors were narrow. The crew quarters were tiny. But everywhere Cyrith looked, he saw humans working together. They moved with purpose. They knew their jobs. He passed a group of soldiers in what they called the mess hall. They were eating and talking loudly. One of them noticed Cyrith and raised a hand in greeting. Hey, Admiral, come join us. First round is on me. Cyrith did not know what that meant, but he found himself walking toward them. They made space for him at their table. A young woman with red hair introduced herself as Lieutenant Commander Laura Bennett. A large man with a shaved head was Sergeant Victor Cole. So, Cole said with a grin, you ready to kill some bugs? Cyrith stared at him. The Krath are not insects. They are a highly advanced species with technology that matches or exceeds our own. Yeah, but they look like bugs, Cole replied. The humans laughed. Cyrith did not understand the humor, but he noticed something in their eyes. Beneath the jokes and the smiles, there was steel. These people were not afraid of what was coming. They were looking forward to it. As Cyrith returned to the Velthari command ship that night, he felt the first small crack in his certainty. Perhaps he had judged the humans too quickly. Perhaps there was more to them than he had assumed. The battle for Kethos Prime would tell the truth. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Kethos Prime, and Admiral Cyrith felt his heart sink. The situation was worse than any report had suggested. Krath ships filled the space around the planet like a swarm of angry insects. There were hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Their dark hulls blocked out the stars. The Velthari orbital defense stations were burning, their shields long since failed. Plasma fire rained down on the planet below. Report, Cyrith ordered, his voice tight. Krath forces outnumber us approximately 15-1, his tactical officer said. Orbital defenses are at 12% and falling. Ground forces report heavy casualties. Approximately 4 million civilians remain in the capital city. 4 million. 4 million Velthari trapped on a dying world. Cyrith closed his eyes. He had seen this before. He had watched worlds fall. He knew what came next. The Krath would break through the defenses, land their troops, and begin the harvest. Every living thing on Kethos Prime would be dead or captured within days. Order the fleet to fall back, Cyrith said. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. We will regroup at the secondary position and wait for reinforcements. Admiral, the civilians. I know. Cyrith gripped the railing in front of him. But we cannot save them if we die here. Retreat is our only option. He expected the human ships to follow. They were guests in this war, after all. They had no connection to Kethos Prime or its people. But when he looked at the tactical display, the human vessels had not moved. "Captain Grant," Cyrith said through the communication channel, "you have your orders. Fall back with the main fleet." There was a pause. Then Grant's voice came through, calm and steady. "With respect, Admiral, I don't think we will be doing that." Cyrith stared at the screen in disbelief. "Captain, this is not a request. We are facing impossible odds. If we engage now, we will be destroyed." "Maybe," Grant replied. "But there are 4 million people down there. We are not leaving them. You will die. Then we die. But we don't abandon civilians. That's not how we do things." Before Cyrith could respond, the human ships began to move. The Resolute led the charge, its engines burning bright as it accelerated toward the Krath formation. The other 11 human vessels followed in a tight wedge pattern. Cyrith watched in horror and fascination. It was suicide. It had to be suicide. No sane commander would fly directly into the teeth of such overwhelming force, but the humans did not slow down. The first Krath ships moved to intercept. They were fast and deadly, armed with weapons that could cut through shields like paper. Cyrith had seen them destroy Velthari cruisers in seconds. The Resolute opened fire. The ship was ugly. Yes, it was crude by galactic standards. But Cyrith had underestimated just how many weapons the humans had packed into that hull. The Resolute erupted with firepower from every angle. Missiles, plasma cannons, railguns, and weapons Cyrith did not recognize. The Krath interceptors vanished in balls of flame, and the humans kept pushing forward. They fought differently than any species Cyrith had ever seen. Their movements were chaotic, unpredictable. One moment a ship would be retreating, the next it would spin and attack from an unexpected angle. They communicated constantly, their voices overlapping on the radio channels in a confusion that somehow made sense to them. "Laura, cover my 6. On it, Captain." "Sergeant Cole, boarding party is go." "Finally, let's crack some shells." Cyrith turned to High Commander Zoreth, who had arrived on the bridge. Both of them stood in stunned silence as they watched the battle unfold. A human escort ship took heavy damage, its engines failed, and it began to drift toward the Krath carrier that had wounded it. Any other species would have abandoned ship. Any other crew would have tried to escape. The humans did neither. Instead, the crippled vessel rotated its bow toward the carrier and fired every remaining weapon at point-blank range. When the weapons ran dry, it simply kept going. The ship rammed directly into the carrier's hull at full speed. Both vessels exploded in a burst of light that lit up the battlefield. "They sacrificed themselves," Zoreth whispered. "They chose death rather than retreat." Cyrith could not speak. He was watching something he had never imagined possible. On the Resolute, Captain Grant coordinated the battle with cool precision. His ship had taken dozens of hits. Fires burned in 3 sections. But his crew kept fighting. They sealed off damaged areas. They rerouted power. They refused to stop. "Sergeant Cole, status on the boarding action?" Cole's voice came back, broken by static and the sound of gunfire. "We are inside the Krath command ship, Captain. These things are ugly up close, but we are making progress. Can you reach the bridge? Give us 10 minutes." Cyrith listened to the exchange with growing disbelief. A human boarding party had penetrated a Krath command vessel. That was supposed to be impossible. The Krath were vicious fighters in close combat. They had claws that could tear through armor and acid that could dissolve metal. But the humans had gone anyway. 9 minutes later, Cole's voice returned. He was breathing hard, and there was pain in his tone. "Command ship is ours, Captain. Lost 6 good people getting here, but we got the bastards." Grant's reply was quiet. "Understood, Sergeant. Good work. All of them." With the command ship captured, the Krath formation began to fall apart. The swarm relied on their central coordination to function. Without it, individual ships became confused, sluggish. The human fleet exploited every moment of hesitation. And then, finally, the Velthari joined the fight. Cyrith had not consciously given the order. His body moved before his mind caught up. He was shouting commands, directing his ships into battle, supporting the human advance. If these strange creatures were willing to die for his people, then he would fight beside them. The battle lasted 3 more hours. By the end, the Krath offensive was broken. Dozens of enemy ships drifted dead in space. The rest retreated into hyperspace. Abandoning Kethos Prime, Cyrith stood on his bridge and stared at the tactical display. The numbers told a story that seemed impossible. 12 human ships against hundreds of Krath vessels. The humans had lost 4 ships. The Krath had lost over 80. He opened a channel to the Resolute. "Captain Grant, I do not have words for what I just witnessed." Grant appeared on the screen. He was covered in soot and blood. One of his arms hung at an odd angle, probably broken. But he was smiling. "Just another day at the office, Admiral. How are the civilians?" "Safe. Because of you." Grant nodded slowly. "That is all that matters." The channel closed, and Cyrith stood alone with his thoughts. He had spent weeks dismissing humans as primitives. He had mocked their emotions, their chaos, their lack of discipline. He had been wrong. These creatures were not primitive. They were something else entirely. Something that the galaxy had never seen before. They fought with a fury that bordered on madness. But it was a controlled madness. A chosen madness. They were willing to die for strangers, for people they had never met. For a cause that was not their own. Cyrith did not know whether to be grateful or terrified, perhaps both. On the surface of Kethos Prime, 4 million Velthari looked up at the sky and saw the flames of the enemy ships fading away. They did not know who had saved them. They did not know that a species from the far edge of the galaxy had bled and died for their survival. But they would learn, and they would never forget. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The Battle of Kethos Prime was on every information channel, in every diplomatic dispatch, in every military briefing room, from the core worlds to the outer rim. A species called humans had charged into impossible odds and won. They had fought the Krath swarm, the terror of 100 conquered worlds, and they had broken them. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly wanted to know everything about it. Trade delegations began drafting proposals. Military analysts studied the battle footage frame by frame. Diplomats whispered in back rooms about what this meant for the balance of power. But on the Resolute, there was no celebration. The ship drifted in orbit above Kethos Prime, its hull scarred with burns and impact craters. Emergency repair teams worked around the clock, but some damage could not be fixed. Some losses could not be repaired. Captain Daniel Grant stood in the main hangar bay. It had been cleared of equipment and vehicles. In their place were rows of simple metal containers. Each one held the remains of a human soldier. 47 containers. 47 lives ended. The entire surviving crew had gathered. They stood in silence, their uniforms clean despite the chaos of recent days. Even the wounded had come, some in hovering medical beds, some leaning on their friends for support. Grant held a small tablet in his hands. His broken arm had been set and wrapped, but he refused pain medication. He wanted to feel this moment clearly. "We are here to honor our fallen," he said. His voice was quiet but carried through the silent hangar. They gave everything they had. They asked for nothing in return. That is what makes them heroes. He began to read the names. Private First Class Samuel Torres. Age 22. From a small town in Texas. He loved baseball and terrible jokes. He died holding the line. When the Krath breached Deck 7, Grant paused. Someone in the crowd was crying softly. Ensign Diana Marsh, age 25, from Seattle. She wanted to be a doctor after her service ended. She died at her station, keeping the engines running when everyone else had evacuated. Name after name, story after story. Grant read them all. Some he had known personally. Some he had only met in passing. But each one mattered. Each one was remembered. Admiral Cyrith stood at the back of the hangar. He had not planned to attend. This was a human ritual. And he was an outsider. But something had drawn him here. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps respect. He watched as the humans wept openly. Soldiers who had fought like demons just days ago now held each other and let their tears fall without shame. Officers embraced enlisted crew. Rank and position meant nothing in this moment. It was strange to Cyrith. The Velthari mourned their dead, of course. But they did so in private. Public grief was considered weakness. A commander who cried in front of his troops would lose their respect. But these humans seemed to find strength in their shared sorrow. They did not hide from their pain. They faced it together. When the names were finished, Grant set down his tablet. He looked at his crew with eyes that were red but steady. "I know this hurts," he said. "It should hurt. The day it stops hurting is the day we have lost ourselves. But I need you to understand something. Every person in these containers knew the risks. They came anyway. They fought anyway. They died so that millions of strangers could live." He pointed toward the viewport, where Kethos Prime hung blue and green against the stars. "Those people down there will never know the names I just read. They will never shake the hands of the soldiers who saved them. But they are alive because of us. Because of them. That matters. That is worth everything." A young officer stepped forward. Lieutenant Commander Laura Bennett, her face pale with exhaustion and grief, raised her voice in song. It was an old melody. Something from Earth's past. One by one, other voices joined her. The song filled the hangar, rising and falling like waves on a shore. Cyrith did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling behind them. It was loss and love and determination, all woven together. It was a promise that the dead would not be forgotten. After the ceremony ended, the crew dispersed slowly. Some went to the mess hall to share drinks and stories. Some returned to their duties. Some simply sat alone with their thoughts. Cyrith found Captain Grant standing by a viewport, staring out at the stars. "May I speak with you?" Cyrith asked. Grant turned. He looked exhausted, older than he had seemed just days ago. "Of course, Admiral. I have a question. It may seem foolish." "There are no foolish questions." Cyrith hesitated. "Your people mourn so openly. You weep in front of your soldiers. In Velthari culture, this would be seen as weakness. How do you maintain discipline? How do you convince your crew to follow you into battle when they have seen you cry?" Grant was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "Admiral, where I come from, showing emotion is not weakness. Hiding from emotion is weakness. My crew does not follow me because they think I am invincible. They follow me because they know I care. They know that if they die under my command, I will feel it, I will carry it, and I will make sure it meant something. But the grief must be overwhelming. How do you continue to fight?" "Because we have to." Grant's voice hardened slightly. Every one of those 47 people had families back on Earth. Parents who will never see their children again. Spouses who will sleep alone for the rest of their lives. Kids who will grow up without a mother or father. I cannot bring them back. I cannot undo what happened. But I can make sure it was not for nothing. I can keep fighting until this war is won." Cyrith stared at him. "You fight because of your grief. Not despite it." "Yes." Grant met his gaze. "Our pain gives us purpose. Our love gives us strength. The Krath think we are soft because we feel things. They are wrong. Our feelings are what make us dangerous." Cyrith thought about this for a long time. He had commanded Velthari forces for decades. He had always believed that emotion was the enemy of good judgment. A clear mind made better decisions. A cold heart did not hesitate. But the humans had proven him wrong. They felt everything, and they fought harder because of it. Their bonds with each other were not weaknesses to be exploited. They were weapons more powerful than any cannon or missile. "I owe you an apology," Cyrith finally said. "For what?" "For underestimating you. For dismissing your people as primitives." "I was wrong." Grant smiled slightly. It was a tired smile, but genuine. "Admiral, we have been underestimated for our entire history. By enemies. By allies. Even by ourselves sometimes. It is nothing new. How do you respond to it?" "The same way we always do." Grant turned back to the viewport. "We proved them wrong." Cyrith nodded slowly. He extended one of his 4 hands in the human gesture of respect he had learned. Then let us prove them wrong together. Grant shook his hand firmly. Together. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant. But somewhere out there, the Krath swarm was regrouping. They would come again. They would bring more ships, more soldiers, more death, and humanity would be waiting. Deep in the void between stars, the Krath High Mind processed the reports from Kethos Prime. The vast intelligence that controlled the swarm had conquered 237 worlds. It had consumed species that had existed for millions of years. It had never known defeat, until now. The High Mind reviewed the battle data again and again. The numbers did not make sense. 12 primitive vessels against a full Krath assault fleet. By all calculations, the humans should have been destroyed in the first minutes of engagement. Instead, they had fought with a fury that defied analysis. They had rammed their crippled ships into Krath carriers. They had boarded enemy vessels and fought hand-to-hand against warriors twice their size. They had refused to retreat, even when retreat was the only logical option. The High Mind did not understand. Every species it had encountered followed predictable patterns. Self-preservation was the primary instinct of all living things. When faced with certain death, organisms fled. This was universal law, but the humans had broken that law. They had chosen death over survival. And somehow, through that choice, they had won. For the first time in its existence, the High Mind felt something that might have been fear. It made a decision. The Velthari Dominion must be crushed immediately. Before the human alliance could grow stronger, every available Krath ship would converge on the Velthari homeworld. One massive strike to end the war. Across the galaxy, the swarm began to move. On the Velthari homeworld, High Commander Zorath received the intelligence reports with growing dread. The Krath were coming. Not a raiding force. Not a siege fleet. Everything. The entire swarm was mobilizing for a final assault. "We cannot survive this," Admiral Cyrith said, his voice heavy. "Even with the human reinforcements, we do not have the ships. We do not have the soldiers. The mathematics are clear." "Then we change the mathematics," Captain Grant replied. He stood in the Velthari war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet positions and enemy movements. His arm was still bandaged, but his eyes were sharp. "Explain," Zorath demanded. Grant walked to the main display and began manipulating the image. Humanity has treaties with 17 species. Trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, cultural exchanges. Most of these species have refused to get involved in this war. They are afraid of the Krath. They do not want to draw attention to themselves. "And you believe you can convince them to fight?" Cyrith asked doubtfully. "No, but I can call in debts." Grant pulled up a series of diplomatic files. 3 years ago, the Terran Federation provided emergency food supplies to the Koran Assembly during their agricultural crisis. 5 years ago, we helped the Maketh Collective rebuild after their civil war. 8 years ago, we defended the Zorathi mining stations against pirate attacks. They owe us. Zorath studied the files. "You would use these debts to demand military support?" "Not demand, ask. Humans do not force our friends into battle. But I think they will come, because they know what the Krath will do to them if we fall." Messages went out across every communication network. Captain Grant spoke to diplomats, generals, and leaders of species that Zorath had never heard of. He asked for help. He explained what was at stake. He made no threats, offered no bribes. He simply told the truth. And one by one, they answered. The Koran Assembly sent 30 warships. The Maketh Collective sent 40. The Zorathi contributed 25. Along with their famous shock troops, species that had ignored the Velthari's pleas for years, suddenly found the courage to stand. But the greatest response came from Earth itself. Admiral Catherine Price arrived at the Velthari homeworld with 47 human warships. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled outside their own solar system. The ships were battered veterans of a dozen conflicts. their hulls marked with the scars of past battles. Price was a legend among human military circles. She had commanded forces in conflicts that spanned decades. She had never lost a major engagement. When she spoke, even Grant stood straighter. "Captain Grant," she said through the communication channel, "I understand you started a war without me." Grant smiled slightly. "Just keeping the seat warm, Admiral. Well, I am here now. Let us finish this." The combined fleet took position around the Velthari homeworld, 230 ships from 8 different species. It was the largest Allied force in recorded galactic history. But when the Krath emerged from hyperspace, even that number seemed small. The swarm filled the sky. Thousands of vessels, ranging from small attack craft to massive dreadnoughts the size of cities. The High Mind had committed everything. This would be the end of the war. One way or another. "All ships, this is Admiral Price." Her voice was calm, almost casual. "The enemy outnumbers us. They are faster, stronger, and meaner than we are. They think we are afraid. They think we will run." She paused. "They are wrong. Today, we show them what happens when you threaten our friends. Today, we show them why humanity is feared. All ships, engage." The battle began. It was chaos on a scale that defied description. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Fighters wove between capital vessels, trading fire at point-blank range. The void itself seemed to burn. The humans led every charge. They took the most dangerous positions, absorbed the heaviest fire, and kept pushing forward. When Velthari ships faltered, human vessels moved to cover them. When Koran cruisers ran low on ammunition, human supply ships braved enemy fire to resupply them. Sergeant Victor Cole led his boarding teams onto 3 different Krath vessels during the battle. Each time, he emerged victorious, his armor covered in alien blood and burns. His soldiers followed him without hesitation. They would have followed him into hell itself. Lieutenant Commander Laura Bennett coordinated fleet movements from the bridge of the Resolute. She processed information faster than any computer, directing ships with precise commands that saved thousands of lives. When a Krath strike force tried to flank the Allied formation, she spotted it minutes before anyone else, and repositioned ships to intercept. Captain Grant fought from the front, his ship taking hit after hit. The Resolute was burning again, half its weapons destroyed, engines failing. But it kept fighting, it kept pushing. And then something strange happened. The Velthari began to sing. It started on one ship, an old war hymn from ancient times. The song spread to other vessels, transmitted through communication channels, carried by voices that had forgotten how to hope. The humans heard it and did not understand the words, but they understood the feeling. They joined in. Human voices mixed with Velthari voices. The Koran added their own songs. The Maketh hummed along in their strange harmonic frequencies. A chorus of species, all facing death together, all refusing to be silent. The Krath High Mind observed this and felt the fear grow stronger. Music. They were singing music in the middle of battle. What kind of creatures did this? What kind of madness drove them? The Allied fleet pushed forward. The Krath lines began to crack. Ships that had never known retreat started pulling back. The perfect coordination of the swarm started to fragment. Admiral Price saw the opening. "All assault teams, prepare for Operation Headhunter. We are going to kill the High Mind." The plan was insane. A direct strike against the Krath command vessel, the massive dreadnought at the center of the enemy formation. Every tactical analysis said it was impossible. The defenses were too strong. The enemy too numerous. Price did not care. "Follow me," she said, and drove her flagship straight into the heart of the swarm. The battle for the Velthari homeworld was entering its final chapter. Admiral Catherine Price led the assault personally. Her flagship, the Valiant, carved a path through the Krath formation with weapons blazing. Behind her, 20 of the fastest human ships followed in a tight wedge, punching through enemy lines like a spear through flesh. The Krath command vessel loomed ahead. It was massive, larger than any ship in the Allied fleet. Its hull was covered with weapons, platforms, and sensor arrays that gave it an almost organic appearance, like a creature from ancient nightmares. "Boarding teams, prepare for hard dock," Price ordered. "We punch through their hull, get inside, and kill everything that moves until we find the High Mind." Sergeant Victor Cole checked his weapons one final time. His team had been reduced to just 15 soldiers, the survivors of a dozen brutal engagements. They were exhausted, wounded, and running low on ammunition. They were also grinning. "You heard the Admiral," Cole said. "We have a bug to squash." The Valiant slammed into the Krath dreadnought at full speed. Docking clamps fired, punching through alien metal. Breaching charges blew open entry points. Human soldiers poured into the enemy vessel. The fighting was immediate and brutal. Krath warriors met them in the corridors, their claws and acid weapons making the close quarters deadly. Humans fell with every step forward, but for every human that died, 3 Krath went with them. Cole led the way, his rifle singing a constant song of death. He had lost count of how many aliens he had killed in this war. It did not matter. He was not fighting for glory or revenge. He was fighting so that the people behind him might live. They pushed deeper into the ship. The corridors became stranger, more organic. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint light. They were approaching the heart of the vessel. "Contact ahead," one of his soldiers shouted. The Krath High Mind did not resemble the warrior drones. It was a vast, bloated creature that filled an entire chamber. Tentacles connected it to the ship's systems, feeding it data from across the battlefield. When it sensed the human intrusion, it screamed in a frequency that made their ears bleed. "Open fire," Cole roared. Everything they had. Every weapon. Every explosive. Every bullet. The chamber became a storm of destruction. The High Mind thrashed and fought back, its tentacles lashing out with deadly speed. Soldiers died around Cole, torn apart or crushed, but they kept shooting. Admiral Price arrived with reinforcements just as the High Mind made its final stand. She walked calmly through the chaos, a pistol in each hand, and put round after round into the creature's central mass. "You should have left us alone," she said quietly. "You should have never touched our friends." The High Mind let out one final, terrible shriek, and then collapsed. Its tentacles went limp. Across the battlefield, every Krath ship suddenly stopped moving, as the coordinating intelligence died. "This is Admiral Price to all Allied forces. The High Mind is dead. The swarm is broken. Finish them." What followed was not a battle. It was a rout. Krath ships, suddenly without direction, became easy targets. Some tried to flee. Some simply drifted, their crews confused and directionless. The Allied fleet swept through them like a storm through dry leaves. By the time the last Krath vessel was destroyed or captured, the Velthari homeworld was safe. The war was not over. Scattered Krath forces would continue to fight for years, but the main threat was finished. The swarm would never again pose a danger to the galaxy. 1 week later, the Galactic Assembly convened in full session for the first time in decades. Representatives from over 300 species gathered to address the aftermath of the war. At the center of the chamber, High Commander Zorath stood to speak. "I come before this assembly with a confession," he began. "When this war started, my people reached out to every major power in the galaxy for help. All of you refused. All of you found reasons to look away, while the Krath consumed our worlds." The chamber was silent. Many representatives looked uncomfortable. Only one species answered our call. A species that most of you consider primitive, emotional, weak. Zorath's voice grew stronger. "You were wrong. We were all wrong." He activated a holographic display showing the battles of the war. Kethos Prime, the siege of the homeworld, the death of the High Mind. The humans did not fight for territory. They did not fight for resources or power. They fought because we asked them to. They died for people they had never met. For a cause that was not their own, they gave everything and asked for nothing in return. Zorath turned to face the human delegation. Captain Grant stood among them, his uniform bearing new medals that he had not wanted to accept. Beside him were Lieutenant Commander Bennett and Sergeant Cole, both looking uncomfortable under the attention of hundreds of alien eyes. To fight alongside humanity is to be honored beyond measure, Zorath declared. They will stand with you against any enemy. They will bleed for you. They will die for you. And they will never, ever stop until the fight is won. He paused, letting his words sink in. But hear this warning as well. To fight against humanity is to be feared across the entire galaxy. They do not know how to surrender. They do not understand the concept of acceptable losses. Harm their friends, and they will hunt you to the edge of the universe. Threaten their people, and they will burn your civilization to ashes. The chamber was completely silent now. The Krath learned this truth too late. The high mind, with all its intelligence and power, could not comprehend what it faced. It saw humans as soft because they cried for their fallen. It saw them as weak because they loved each other. It was the greatest mistake the swarm ever made. Zorath raised all four of his hands in the formal Velthari gesture of highest respect. On behalf of the Velthari Dominion, I thank the Terran Federation for their sacrifice. I award Captain Daniel Grant, Lieutenant Commander Laura Bennett, and Sergeant Victor Cole the Star of Velthos, the highest military honor our people can bestow, and I offer humanity something no species has ever been offered before. A permanent seat on the Velthari High Council, as equal partners and eternal allies. The assembly erupted into discussion. Some species protested, others voiced support. But no one could deny what had happened. Humanity had proven itself on the battlefield. The old assumptions were shattered. After the session ended, Captain Grant found Admiral Cyrith standing alone near a viewport. The Velthari officer was watching Earth's delegation meet with dozens of other species, all suddenly eager to form connections with humanity. They are afraid of you now, Cyrith observed. Grant shrugged. Some of them. Others are just curious. It will take time for them to understand us. Will they ever truly understand? Probably not. Grant smiled slightly. We barely understand ourselves. We are a messy, contradictory, emotional species. We fight and love with the same intensity. We can be cruel and kind in the same breath. I do not think any alien will ever fully grasp what makes us tick. And yet you continue to reach out, to make friends, to build alliances. That is who we are. We cannot help it. Humans need connection. We need family. Even if that family includes strange aliens with too many arms. Cyrith laughed, a rare sound from him. I suppose I will take that as a compliment. You should. Grant extended his hand. Thank you, Admiral. For trusting us. For fighting beside us. For seeing us as we truly are. Cyrith took the hand and shook it firmly. Thank you, Captain, for showing me that I still had things to learn. They stood together, watching the stars. The war was over, but a new chapter was beginning. Species that had never spoken to Earth were now sending diplomatic missions. Trade proposals were flooding into human communication channels. The galaxy was waking up to a new reality. Humanity had arrived, not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as friends to those who needed them, and nightmares to those who threatened the innocent. In the years that followed, the alliance between humans and Velthari became the foundation of a new era. Other species joined, drawn by the promise of protection and partnership. The galaxy was not peaceful, not by any means, but it was safer, because everyone knew that if you stood with humanity, you would never stand alone. And if you stood against them, well, the Krath had learned that lesson, the hard way.